My name is Leon Lamont, and then I finished school at Huguenot High School in Wellington, and from there I got inscripted to the army. I really enjoyed this, and then I decided to join permanent force. So I had the privilege to stay in the military as a professional soldier for 17 years.
I'm Mark Franklin. I grew up in a little town called Carltonville, outside Carltonville on a farm. I went to Carlton Jones High School, matriculated there. I then joined the 13th of January 1983. I joined the South African Defence Force, 1 Special Service Battalion.
My name's Warren Horsey. I grew up in Pinetown in South Africa, 17 when I finished school, so a bit of an eye-opener getting on the train with hundreds of other people and heading up there on the train. You know, we were in a pretty quiet carriage, but geez, there was some wild parties going on in the place on the way up there. The roof ride from the train station to the unit in the back of the Bedfords, where the guys drove like maniacs and tried to push us out the back, and then getting off the back of the Bedford and guys screaming at us in Afrikaans, and English was no longer going to be the language I was going to be speaking for the next few years, I'd say.
I'm very new to I'm ex-military here in Australia, but I'm just keen to get an understanding of the squadron and the regiment structures.
So in South Africa, Armoured Corps Regiment, it's got 3 squadrons as we call it, and then the supporting element that support those 3 squadrons. Those years, because we had so many conscripts and guys coming in, I think we had from A squadron through to E squadron, and plus the support squadron, which has got all the chefs, and the clerks, and the truck drivers. And even though they had 5 squadrons, only B and C squadron was assigned to go to border.
And with conscripts, did you find it difficult to manage those people versus those that wanted to be there?
So in South Africa, it was compulsory to do military service. When you left school, you went to the military or postponement of that, and you were allowed to go study. You get classified when you walk in. You go through quite a thorough medical, and you are assigned the best one could be G1, K1, and you can basically do anything. Bullets couldn't hurt them. You break a soldier down as far as possible, and then you build him up through good discipline and good training.
We were treated in some places very badly, but it was to make you a man. Taking your mother away from you suddenly. The basics, when they started that first week or so, where they start building the discipline in drilling informations and getting you fit.
From a fitness point of view, I was always pretty fit. I could always run, and so the running side of the thing and that sort of thing, the physical side of it didn't worry me too much. It wasn't too bad. What did kill me was the lack of sleep. I just never had enough sleep, and I must admit I bloody hated the sergeant that had us as the drill master.
And then, of course, there was always the thing that everybody who joined in the military, in the operational unit, that would be, was going to go to the border. So if I'm busy training a guy, or I tell him, you must be able to run 2.4 kilometers under 12 minutes. And I say, if you can't do it, then, when we go to the border, you're probably going to come back in a jiffy bag.
Because that was the norm. You wake up in the morning, you go do your 2.4, you come back, you have breakfast, you carry on with classwork. You have to do it under 12 minutes, that's the norm. But they always push you to do it around about 10, 11. But once they start loading you with equipment, it starts getting all more difficult and stuff like that. But the times stay the same.
From a basic training point of view, I went to School of Armour, which was the officers' course. It was intense. I'd say it was intense. I'd never done cadets at school or anything like that. So I did lots of running around trees, picking leaves off trees and shit like that for not stamping my foot at the right time.
Our instructors was very strict. They could basically do to you whatever they wanted to. Not in terms of physically harming you, but you were damn scared of them. Maintaining that fitness, you were constantly, if you had the shooting range and you had to return back to base, you either run back or there was always an excuse why you weren't driving back to the base. When you think your body can't, you haven't reached 80% of your capacity. You'd, for example, do a route march of, let's say, 100 kilometers, and you're told you finish then. When you get there, they say, no, sorry, you must still go to that mountain, and then you go there. When you fit, nothing is really a challenge. We were bulletproof in those days, or we thought we were.
Most of the basics, what we did was the R4, so how to handle it, how to work with it, safety features.
I enjoyed the shooting on the rifle range and stuff like that. I'd grown up in a city. I didn't even own a pellet gun, so to get hold of a rifle and shoot something was quite a big deal for me. It was actually quite fun.
Basically, the armour trained their own infantry, as proper infantry. You started off with basic training, and after basic training, you went through the individual phase, And in the individual phase, you were trained to drive an armored car, to shoot an armored car. And after that, you did crew training.
I didn't drive before I went to the army. I wasn't old enough to get a license or anything like that. So kind of learned how to drive in the army. And that's what I became, a driver in an armored car.
I would say after basics, when they start with the formal training on gunnery and driving and breaking you up into troops or into your own car, that crew stays with you for the next 12 months or longer.
I'm keen, because you've spoken about the human element, I'm keen to find out about the vehicles.
We at HSB, we had the Eland 90 armored car. It was a development from the French Panhard armored car. Totally roadworthy, and it could go on public roads.
The Airlines proved to be extremely successful. In a number of skirmishes with Angolan forces, Airlines were able to knock out the more powerful Soviet-manufactured T-55 tank.
We had two variants of the Eland. We had the Eland 60 and we had the Eland 90. As the name indicates, the Eland 60 was fitted with a 60mm rear loading mortar.
It's a 60mm mortar. So the first stage when you load it is you put your charges on either one charge, it's like a little horseshoe, or two charges or three charges maximum, you can't go more than that. And then the next stage is on the head, you have to turn and put it on, and then you give the firing orders to the gunner.
And then the Eland 90 was fitted with a 90mm semi-automatic gun, which could fire high-explosive anti-tanks as well as high-explosive rounds. Towards the latter half of our training, the Rattle, the six-wheeled infantry fighting vehicle, was introduced.
90mm, it's a manual. It's not like the tank; it's automatic turret. It's a manual turret, so the gunner has to manually wind it up and get it on target. The distance on that thing is you can shoot further than that. I think a total distance, if you elevate maximum elevation, it can go up to 3 kilometers, and then direct fire is 1 kilometer max.
Furthermore, we had our logistical vehicles, and those were 5 and 10 ton variants of South African trucks, which were built with anti-mine capability. So the bottom of the vehicle was shaped in a V. So if it detonated the mines, and you would blow up the wheel, but the engine and the body would remain intact.
So you would have had recovery mechanics and vehicle mechanics.
Yeah. Okay, so we also had our engineers, or our TIFFs, were light workshop troops. So they had like a breakdown truck with a jig on the back, and they could hook an armored car and lift the front wheels and tow it.
The 1,000-foot flares we used, got a lever at the bottom that you trigger, you pull the peg out. It's like a hand grenade, and then you just release the lever and it will go up 1,000. What we did is you shoot those up, and the gunners and the people on the Elands and the Rattles and that, they then try and shoot those flares down. And then you also had the smoke launchers on the back of the turrets. The same effect there. If you're going into wind, you don't shoot them, because then the smoke just irritates the gunner or the driver or the crew commander. And that's the maximum that thing shoots is about 10 meters. And also you use it as a cover screen if you want to withdraw out of a fight. Another item I used to love is the 7.62 Brownings, the two mounted, one in the turret and one on top of by the crew commander. Because if you don't set the barrel and the timing of that thing, you don't get the firing power that you need out of that weapon. To clean it and strip it, it's actually very simple, and it's a very old weapon. They used that thing in the Second World War. Or if your instructors aren't looking at that, you'll open a belt of 200 rounds, which is not the correct thing to do because you wear out your barrel. And then that barrel used to get so hot that you can't touch it. In one exercise, you're pushing through 2,000, 3,000 rounds a day. M26 training, where you're in the trenches and you throw a hand grenade into old house and stuff like that. I can recall a thing where I think it was with Boris, where they threw the hand grenade and it didn't go over the little wall, so it bounced back at us. So Boris went and kicked it out the way still. So you first wait till it lands and then you dive. That was a M26 practice round, just to get the simulation of the Calueque battle. But that was the simulations we went through to get the correct training.
It was just an education. I just remember being freezing cold in De Brugge, sleeping in a tent in the middle of winter when the fire buckets froze solid during winter, and being really cold. Not a hell of a lot of fun, that sort of thing. I mean, I was very friendly with a guy called Harry Hepton, and I just remember when we were doing shooting training that warned us not to lower the 90mm cannon directly down onto the ground, and for some reason Harry lowered it to full lower position and shot into the ground in front of us, blew the the instructor off the back of the armoured car, and Harry spent the next 2 weeks running up and down the mountain. When he wasn't shooting with the armoured car, he was running up and down the mountain with 2 90mm on his shoulders.
SSB turned 50 years old in 1983. So the OC, a guy by the name of Alwyn van Niekerk, decided to have a massive party around about the 1st of May when when SSB was formed, back in 1933. The event was named in Afrikaans, we call it the Feest van die Bees. But as part of the festivities, we had, or rather our technical people, had worked on all the old tanks, the Sherman tanks that graced the gardens in and around SSB. They worked on those Sherman tanks, and they were able to get 5 of them, but in running condition. The whole crew of 5 guys, as they fought in Solino in France, in Italy back in 1944, the whole crew, all 5 of them, was there at weekend, and they were able to get into the tank, and the driver took them. Their driver, it's an 85-year-old man, got in the tank, and he drove his crew around the hangar, got out, and to see an 85-year-old grown man crying, it was absolutely, that made a massive impression on me.
PLAN carried out most of its insurgency activities into Southwest Africa in the rainy season between February and April. Heavy rain made military activities more difficult, provided more cover and concealment for the insurgents from South African patrols, and washed away insurgent tracks. PLAN activities consisted mainly of blowing up road infrastructure, laying landmines, and ambushes. Oshakati, the base of 1 Special Service Battalion, an armored reconnaissance unit, purpose-built in the northwest of the Oshakati compound. Tents with a few brick buildings surrounded by bulldozed sand walls. At the one end, a 30-foot anti-aircraft tower with a 40mm anti-aircraft gun.
The first time we went, I think, was back in either November or December of '83. That was our first sort of tour. And I remember getting up there, and the first introduction was the sort of transit camp that you went to, and I think it was in Grootfontein. It was like a concentration camp.
The area adjacent to Angola, called in Namibia, is called Uvambuland. So the section against the border was divided into Sector 10, was in the far west, in the vicinity of Ruakana. And then you had 20 and Sector 30, which was completely east again there towards the completely south. Oshakati was like the headquarters for Sector 10. So there was a general in command, and there was quite a large support base. Now, Oshakati, as the crow flies, is probably about 50 kilometers from the actual border. Oshakati was, on occasion, it was bombarded with the enemy who would carry mortars and stuff across the border and then walk close by and then fire a few mortars and then run like hell to get back over the border.
I seem to remember in that one that things had hotted up a little bit. I do know that we were giving blood a lot, so I'm positive. So whenever anything went on, I was woken up in the middle of the night to go and give blood. And I must admit that was one of the things I do remember. I was giving blood a fair bit on the second trip to the operation area.
Okay, at that time, during Askari, I was a captain, 10 years service in 1 SSB, second in command of C Squadron 1 SSB. The squadron commander was Major van Jaarsveld. My call sign was Tango 30 Alpha. Oshakati, that is 10 Armored Car Squadron. Oshakati was quite a big base, but it was more administrative base. In other words, you were in the operational area, but it was more like being in the States, in a normal base.
In Armored Car Squadron, it was a fun time, enjoyed it there. We every morning clean up your bunga, your tents. Every morning you had to have a pay service, because you go out for 14 days, come back for a rest period. Go out for 14 days, come back for a rest period. You're allowed 2 beers, that's that. 2 beers for the week, and that's all you had allowed to drink. And then do the servicing on the vehicles. That was also done on a weekly basis. You go service the vehicle, clean it up.
And there you do stalparade. In other words, you clean the armored car. You unpack that armored car, take all the ammunition about, all the tote. You clean that thing, you grease everything, you maintain everything. There's an inspection hold, you make sure everything is nice, and then you pack it back again and you're ready for your next.
We had dartboards, we had, I think it was a pinball table, and then if you were naughty at base, then you get a tire to flip for the day.
All the troops would just be off and they'd play volleyball, or they were tanning was like their favorite thing, because when you return from the border, you had to have a proper suntan on themselves. And they rubbed brake fluid Because if you tan with brake fluid, you tan copper.
I live in Australia now, and being sun smart, it's just insane to think people are doing that sort of thing.
You had to do the normal maintenance tasks on the base. I know we started building a swimming pool. It was a malaria-infested area. So every Friday, you had to drink your anti-malaria tablets. But somehow somebody figured out that the malaria tablet, because it sits in your skin, it acts as a non-tanner. So if you drink the malaria pills, you won't tan. So you had to physically force that pill down the troopie's mouth and make sure he swallows it, because otherwise they get malaria. And based on when they came back, how brown they were, very few of them actually took those pills.
So you had the enemy to deal with, you had people who were setting mines and other sorts of booby traps, and then you had malaria, and then you had the additional sun for the skin cancer to get you later.
Oshakati itself was quite a nice enough camp. The food was terrible. I remember we landed up with people that I don't think were ever cooks, had never been trained to be cooks. They just cooked fried bully beef, and it was terrible. I do remember when we first, I think it was the first night that we arrived there, they had the anti-aircraft guns around the perimeter of the camp, and they started firing them in the night, and I remember just climbing under my bed in the middle of the night, and I think it was just a standard induction for the newbies whenever they came in.
So in and around Sector 10, there were different tasks to be performed, and one of them was on the western side of Angola, near Ruacana. They've got that Calueque water scheme. So the Calueque water scheme was generating power, and that power was transferred to power lines down south to Windhoek. That power line, it was a favorite target of the terrorists that came across, carry or explosives, and then they'd blow that power line. It was one thing that you had to do. You control that power line for a distance of, say, 200 kilometers. And then my troop, Troop 5, was assigned to doing that power line patrol. And we did that for quite a few days. Because it's quite, the tracks underneath the power line is quite predominant. Captain Duplessis was our commander at the time. He told us, you don't drive on those tracks, because there were landmines placed on those tracks. So the first day that you're there, you're sort of 50 meters that side, and the next day you're 50 meters that side of those tracks. And then the third day you're sort of 25 meters, and the fourth day that side, and eventually you start crossing the road, that tweespoor, more and more and more, and eventually you're just driving on that tweespoor. You don't need a landmine. You just sit all day and shake in the armored car, and you get to a crest and you check for the next 20 kilometers or as far as you can see with the binoculars. I think it's the poles were numbered. I remember when we returned from patrolling that area, one of my armored cars, the one wheel, the right front wheel, the suspension of the eland, and that whole attachment broke off completely. We were stuck. And we had to get back to Ruacana. In Afrikaans, you say hangsleep, and we managed to hang tow one armored car with another armored car.
The power line patrols were making sure that the Swapo and Fapla people didn't blow up the power lines and the communication poles that they put up there. So that was all done from Kunene right down to Kamanyap, up to the Ruacana waterfalls, and make sure that we don't stay on the tracks, because there was a lot of mines that they put on those power lines. I don't know who's Eland hit. No, that was on the Ruacana side where they hit the landmine. Also, a nice thing about the power line patrols, you get to see the waterfalls.
While we were at Oshakati, Swapo blew the power line, and the armored car troop get to the power line. They found this dead elephant. The elephant stepped on a landmine, and the armored troop checking out this elephant, and we just cannot leave this tusk here. I mean, this is a wasting of tusk, and they cut it out to the pangas on the car. And there's 12 members in the armored car troop, and they cut this tusk into 12 pieces, and every trooper or everybody in the troop got one piece of tusk, and they start filing little crosses and hearts and whatever they do. But small problem, nature conservation heard about the elephant and went there, and what's in the ground? Armored car tracks. And they went to, and they got hold of the police, because now it's smuggling of ivory. You must know the mental attitude of troopers. You ask them, listen, we're looking for elephant tusks, and they look at you with absolutely zero registration. Elephant tusk, no, we don't. Eventually, after a few days, we found out, no, they've got the tusk. They were crying when they got the tusk, and it was cut up in small pieces. It was closely a disaster.
The other duty we had to perform, it was so-called on-clock real, like curfew at night. After 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock at night, there's a curfew, and nobody is allowed to travel. So you send a patrol out, and if you see anybody or anything moving, you shoot.
Second trip was towards the end of the army. By that stage, we knew what we were expecting, purely patrolling, doing a lot of interaction with the locals, going to visit kraals, talking to the locals, trying to win the locals over as best you could in those sort of circumstances.
They call it the PV patrols. The local, you have to go do reconnaissance between the locals, go mingle with them, go understand how they work, and get information when last did they see somebody suspect in the area.
Another thing that we had to do is there was no school for the kids in Oshakati. The school was in Ondangwa, which was about 20 kilometers away. So those kids, every morning, the school bus had to be escorted from Oshakati to Ondangwa. First, the engineers had to sweep the road for landmines, then you wait there, and in the afternoon after the kids have from school, and you bring them back to Oshakati. In those days, the bus consisted of a buffel, a roof on top, a soldier with a rifle inside with the kids, or your OC would decide, now's a good time, go and patrol. So while the kids are at school, you do something else, and then come back, and then 2 or 3 in the afternoon, you get the school kids, and you'll bring them back. And occasionally we'd go to the shooting range, just confirm our guns are working fine. The sand is very white. You get out of that aeroplane on the runway, the glare from that white sand, it's unbelievable. It's like walking on a floodlight. And you get a mopani fly. It's a small little fly. Mopani is a type of tree you get, and they love to live amongst those. Anywhere where there's moisture, on your eyes, in the corner of your mouth or inside your mouth, they are forever pestering you. I don't know if you know mutton cloth. The troops used to cut them in lengths. You put it over your face, and you just cut holes for your eyes and for your mouth.
Eventually, they deployed us again to Angola. Of course, after Askari, SWAPO started infiltrating again, and we had to do in the triangle between the Kunene River and the Namibian border, patrolling into Angola about, I would say, 80 kilometers into and from the Kunene River about 50 kilometers to the east.
Patrols that we did from Ruakana to Kunene River up to Xangongo. Those patrols are mostly done to pick up because they made canoes out of the trees, and that. Our task was then to try and pick up those movement of them coming across the river. You get to class down, so in the late afternoons we get it together as a crew, you make food, you wait till sunset comes. In the time that you're making food, you prepare your vehicle again, clean it up, clean your rifles up. One of us in the crew or in the troop will then decide who's going to be the chef for the day, or there's a combined effort there. We put all our red packs together and we cook food for ourselves. So if someone spotted us where we're making food or eating, we move into another spot where we can go rest and sleep. And then in that process, we then allocate 2-hour shifts right through the night till the early mornings, stay awake and we listen. Because you can't, the nights are so dark in Angola and in Southwest that you can't even see your hand in front of you. So you teach yourself to listen to sounds and footsteps. And then also that you also know who snores the most. Before the sun rises, when it's dark again, everybody gets up, get a route march out there to the next place. Before sun comes up, you move out of that position again, because if they've spotted you, then you're the sitting duck. When you stop to rest, we don't stop next to each other, we stop far apart. You stop in a lager, you don't park next to each other. If Shauna is a piece of dry felt, suddenly it's dry and there's nothing, it's a grassland, and within a space of 10 minutes it's a river. The water doesn't soak away.
One night, after 12, we were lying in a liga around the fence next to the river. One night, a member of the local population arrived there with a donkey cart. And the guard challenged him and he said, listen, medico in Portuguese is a doctor. They need a doctor. And I had an optometric lance corporal. He was very, very good. Eventually, we understood that some family relative of the local pop had a problem. So I sent 4 armored cars in the infantry section to escort this guy to see what the problem was. After about 6-7 hours the next morning, they came back. His daughter was busy giving birth to a baby and delivered the baby, and coming back a few days after that, this old man, he was the chief of the area. He came back and he gave us a boerbok, and we accepted it, and we asked him, listen, your daughter, is she okay? Yeah, she's okay. We asked, listen, father, where's the father? And the old man grinned just so wide. He said, oh, he's too swap.
Even next to the Kunene River, so when we stayed there, at night you can hear the crocodiles. You lie there and you hear somebody clapping hands, and then you know there's crocodiles right next to the river, so you must move. So we caught fish with, we had cortex and what are those plastic explosives that we throw into the water, but we didn't get that ammo. That was carried by the 1 Parachute Battalion boys. They carried that stuff with them.
Wilfred and Leon and Marius went on patrols today, and they were the three troop commanders. Eventually, I think they organized it on a different frequency where I could not hear that. They organized next to the meeting next to the river. When they met somewhere, they found this island in the river with a little narrow piece of land joining the island with the side of the river. And they decide that will now be a good spot to overnight. Well, I suppose they organized some meat and had a braai and a few beers or what. But in the catchment area of the Kunene, it started raining heavily. And during the night, the water of the Kunene risen with about 1.5 meters. When they woke up the next morning, that little strip of land was gone. They contacted me on the radio and they said, listen, we've got a problem. We've got 12 cars on this little island, cannot get them off. And I put out an immediate request to every available recovery vehicle in the area, please be on standby. After about 2 hours, I think it was Marius coming on the end, said, listen, problem solved. They reversed onto the far side of the island, and they charged the water, and because of the V-shape of the hole, the car glided about 6 or 7 meters until came to more solid ground. They pulled all the cars out.
Yeah, they shot over the Watson. We got the whole of the SA Colored Corps that was patrolling on the wall there, running away, and people were shooting. And I can't remember who shot the RPG-7 towards the wall. It was quite fun, and the next morning we were all reprimanded.
There's lots of things that happened that I'll never know about. Remember the mellow yellow road race from Oshakati to Ndangwa? Coca-Cola Company launched this new product, Mellow Yellow, and part of their launching was road races, the Mellow Yellow road race, and they had one in Oshakati. It's from Oshakati to Ndangwa, 35 kilometers, and every troop in the squadron volunteered to run, and we had 6 teams running, and that was quite fun. Running the 35 kilometers between Oshakati and Ndangwa with choppers escorting you every about 150 meters, infantry deployed on the side, armored cars and everybody. What happened is the troops got bored, and I decided, no, we're going to organize this competition where you roll a tire through an old, I did not know it, it was an old verdampingspan, and we marked out a route in this slush, coke tins, where you've got to roll the armored car tire in a race between them. It was a huge mess. Afterwards, when we got out, the medics took a steam cleaner and just sprayed us off. It was fun. You know who won that competition? Wilfred Moore.
You couldn't say much in your letters. You weren't allowed to say where you were, what area, what time you had to say hello. Actually, that's all you could say is hello and goodbye. Yeah, there were 7 different types of rat packs, 2 and 4 and 5 that were actually the worthwhile ones. The others were dogs. Or you swap out with your fellow colleagues, because the one had cheesy in and baked beans, little milkshakes, you get a soup pack in there, and then you get those dog biscuits that you can't actually eat, but you eat them. So you sleep behind the cars, or if it's rainy season, you sleep inside the car. You sit up straight and sleep. You sleep next to each other, and then I think one out of every crew gets a turn to stand guard. And then we, either kick like next to you to wake up, especially the patrols from Calueque to Angola to Xangongo. The vehicles don't sleep next to each other. They sleep quite far apart, but then the only way of communication is with the rope. or a string or something to wake the next dog up. You can't stand up and walk over there because then there's movement and people see movement at night. Although it's so dark that you can't even see yourself.
We knew nothing about what was going on there. And that was part of the whole issue. Even going into Angola, even when we were on our first sort of operations, first of all, we didn't know anything that was going on. So it was just, you pitched up there, they said you're going to the border, right, okay, that's what's expected of you. You get in the plane, you fly up there and you get dropped off in a unit and you go on. In terms of what was happening in Angola, had no idea. What our purpose in the place was, again, no idea whatsoever. We were just doing there. It was, for me, in reality, it was counting down the days. We had 2 years to be there. It was just counting down the days until I got out of there. The only news you got was from the TV and radio. They didn't talk about it much, so you didn't discuss it. And even when you went into those things, you were kind of conditioned to follow orders. So there was no questioning what anybody would do or why am I going to go and do this? Well, don't even think about asking that question. Unsettling, but also everybody did it, so it was just part of the routine. I do remember turning 19 in a camp in La Hatla or one of those places in far northern Cape somewhere. We were doing some training over there and thinking my life's passed me by. I'm 19 years old and I've lost half my life type of thing being out there. Unsettling in those days is that you just didn't know what the future held for you.